And our happiness guaranteed as well, hopefully.
Hopefully.
With the next talk by Thomas Gelf talking about automated monitoring with, I assume, some director in it. Welcome.
Somewhat, a little bit. Well, good afternoon. Hi. It's hard to do a talk after Michael, but I also have a lot of pictures, but not so fancy ones this time. Just screenshots. Well, about me, I'm doing a lot of things with Icinga and other tools, and today I'm here talking about one of my babies, and that's the Icinga Director. First of all, who is running Icinga 1? Okay, Icinga 2? Woo! And who is running the Director? Perfect. And the others, what's up with you? Well, we'll see. Next time, I want to see all the hands up, because in my beliefs, Director is an amazing tool. I'm going to explain you just one little part of the Director. That's the automation part, or the import, synchronization, deployment part. And I'm doing so based on some practical examples. Do not take them literally by the word. All of them have their background and the meaning, and it's a reason why I'm showing you them. There's a reason why I'm showing you them. And yeah, but sometimes I'm trying to joke a little bit. So we're talking about automation, and automation in Director means mostly that we have data sources where we import data from. We then synchronize from that data sources to Director objects. I'll go into the details very soon. And what you definitively should do once you trust Director, configure jobs and let it run all day long and all night long, fully automated. First, import. So Director can use any kind of data source. It ships a few ones, like import from SQL databases. So depending on the libraries you have, you can import from, of course, MySQL and Postgres databases, but also Oracle and others. DB2 should work right now. I didn't try it. It was a community contribution. Well, a lot of databases, then you can import from LDAP, and this means that you also can import from, of course, Active Directory. We'll talk about this. But import sources, like many other parts of Director, are fully modular. So you can hook in your own code that sits in your modules in an upgrade-safe way. So you can have your very special, very complicated, very customized code that imports from sources no one else has, and ship just data to the Director, and it will work fine, because Director of import is separated from sync for a reason, because sources sometimes can be slow. So for Director, it isn't a problem if your source needs half an hour to ship its data. Then okay, you will see it later, but that's fine. And if something breaks, that's not a problem. So import is always all or nothing. So if it stops in the middle, nothing bad will happen. And yeah, it doesn't disturb the other tasks, so you can still continue to work while a lot of data is flowing in. Then the next component is the synchronization. Even with lots of data, Director is creating everything in memory. Even if you have very lot of hosts and services, that's fine. Just give them a little bit more memory, but that's way faster than doing thousands of queries against your databases. And well, it loads the existing objects, it builds the new ones according to your rules, and then it's applies the new ones on the old ones and asks for changes and writes only the changes to disk and keeps an activity log. So every single change is visible in the history of every object and, well, as a whole, big log. And Jobs run as a background service, so you can say, please import from Active Directory once a minute because it's fast enough. Import from PuppetDB only like every 10 minutes because we have a lot of data there, and import from, I don't know, a lot of sources. We'll see some of them today. And then run sync as fast as you can and deploy every 5 minutes. But if the last deployment has been like less than 15 minutes ago, then wait a little bit, so all the things can be configured. If you initially do not trust Director, you can also configure it to use the time periods you configured for Icinga itself. So you can say, please deploy only during office hours. So and please not 5 minutes before I'm going home, just to be on the safe side. So all these features can be configured in the UI. Oh yeah, just some numbers. For those of you who do not know, Director is still a very young project. 1.0 has been tagged nearly 2 years ago. And yesterday I've been at a customer's place who is running it from beta version in production. And I just took some numbers for you. So since then we did nearly 6,000 deployments. It has in its history a few 100,000 activity log entries. It did 150,000 input runs, and right now we still intentionally did no database cleanup, so every single import is still in the database the way it looked at the time being. So there's a lot of things we could do with the data. Mostly it's useless, just, you know, we can. Because all the data is a little bit deduplicated and so on. And well, right now they're running with close to 100,000 service checks, and all of them, or most of them, running every single minute. So it's not that big, but it's for just two Icinga masters without satellites. It's okay. Databases on separate systems. Yeah, and Director is still running fine, doing all the deployments and fully automated. So they could have a lot more deployments. As you can see, there are more synchrons than deployments, but they say, well, you know, such a big Icinga needs 1 to 2 minutes to have the database re-synchronized once restarting, so they're limited to 1 deployment every half an hour. So that's something you can configure in Director. Okay. Oh, wait. Maybe let's show you what I'm talking about. Just as we're here. Sorry. Here you go. So Icinga Director looks like this. You go there, you see your automation part with, oh, there's some input source failing right now. There is synchronization, that the jobs. What I didn't mention or show is the activity log and the deployment itself. So deployment means I go to a host, just to show you what happens here. Pick it, change, I don't know, IP address, and deploy it. But, oh no, I changed the rules here. Sorry for that. Deploy again. And you see, it did a deployment. The deployment is fine. I see the startup notifications. Oh, I switched to Icinga version, so there are some warnings there. And maybe let's show you this one a little bit bigger. You see the whole startup log. So what happens internally is the Director builds the configuration, stores the configuration as it is to its own database, and then ships it through the API to Icinga. And that's it. Icinga then, in a separate process, restarts, tries to parse the configuration. If the configuration is fine, it switches the process and the new one keeps running. If it fails, nothing bad happens. The old process keeps running and everything is fine. So even if the deployment breaks, nothing bad happens. And the Director then tries to collect that information about the restart. Icinga keeps it on disk, and then it gets through the API the startup log and the state of the deployment. So for every deployment, Director knows whether it went fine or not, what the startup says, and how it looks like. Then every single deployment in the history has the whole configuration here. And even in an environment as large as the one I mentioned before, it's not a problem to have all the files there. There will be some new cleanup jobs to help you throwing away old garbage. But right now, no feature request asked for this, so it seems that people do not have a problem with that amount of data, and that's nice. That's what I wanted to know. And well, you can have a look at every single file here and so on. If there is, for example, in the error somewhere, if it's showing errors here, then you can click directly on the object, and it jumps in that file, in that position, and you can examine it. For example, let's go back to the configuration. Let's pick a host. For example, you see here there's just some sample hosts. I can click on the host name, and then jump to the configuration, change it, and deploy it again. And my favorite example is, let's imagine that everything is automated, and this sometimes scares people. Because what if there is no error, but there's a logical error? So someone messed up something with, let's say, Puppet, and wrongly configured all the nodes, and you not only deployed the wrong configuration to a few thousand servers, but you also deployed those errors to, of course, automated it through the monitoring. So monitoring is wrong. All the systems are broken, or at least many of them. And this is a moment where you really need your monitoring system. You want to see what's wrong, and you see a wrong state. So that's perfect. You didn't know, okay, yesterday everything was fine. You go back to yesterday's configuration and say, well, pick that configuration and redeploy it again. And this doesn't mean that there's no undo of any change in the director. It just picks that configuration exactly as it was and ships it again. And so you deploy it. It's now running again, the same configuration, everything. You get a clear picture of what's really running, what's correct in your environment, and once you fix deployments, the errors, then you can deploy the current configuration again. What you see here, for example, the activity log now shows 30 changes, because I deployed an old state, and it knows, oh wait, all those 30 changes here haven't been deployed. So the current configuration reflects everything till that modification here, and the rest is not running live. So just to give you a small idea of how this works, how this looks like. And then you can say, okay, deploy all the pending changes, and it will deploy the current version once again. Or do not do it that way, just go back to my deployments. I can also just pick that configuration as files and say, well, deploy this one again. It will deploy it, and you will immediately see that this number here switches. Or if I click here, then you also see that there are no pending changes. The menu refreshes in like 10 seconds, and then even the number here goes away. There's nothing pending, nothing to deploy. We are at the current state once again. So just as a small introduction for those who haven't used this yet, that's how deployment works in Director. So even, that's the message I want to give you, even if you use the job, even if you do it fully automated, trust it. There's not much that can go wrong, and if something goes wrong, it's easy to fix. Okay, let's start with the first scenario. That's just one example that could be useful to those of you who are still running Icinga 1. That's an example of showing you what to do with SQL import sources. So imagine you have Icinga 1, there's your IDO database, and you want to migrate your configuration. Now, everybody who migrated knows just copying the configuration doesn't work, and it makes no sense, because Icinga 2 has much more possibilities in its configuration language. So you want to recreate your services. You maybe want to import your hosts, its properties, some custom variables, but you do not want to import your old command definitions with arg1, arg2, arg3, and have the same logic in Icinga 2. This makes no sense. You will not get happy that way. It works, but please don't do so. So that's the scenario I'm going to show you right now, and just some SQL examples, just to give you an idea of how the IDO works. There's an Icinga objects table. There is an isActive flag that you should always check when you work with the database. Just a very short example. I pick the address, the name, display name, some nodes. Check whether is it active or no, and that's it. Now, to add some custom variables, you need some deeper SQL knowledge, so you have to use that thing that's called join. So you join the custom variables and say, okay, I want to have the operating system, and you get the value out there, and that's it. You do not have to remember the query. It's on the slide, so if you need it, you can use it later on. It's a little bit tricky if there are more custom variables, but that's in like if you have some key value tables, then you have to join it again and again to get one object with every single property in a single row. Otherwise not, but that way you need to do it that way. And you see, I join it twice with a different alias, CV1, custom variable 2, or whatever, and you get more properties this way. Just as a small example. You can use the query itself to clean up the data. Like if it's an empty string, then please give null so that we have no value, because empty strings are in fact a value, but the wrong one, and so on. So this, use all your SQL power to clean this up. People often ask me how to, for example, import a host group membership. And what you, for example, in SQL can do is you can group concat values. So you group by some property and have a lot of rows in the other table, so a lot of host group memberships, for example. Then you group it with some separator like host group, comma, host group, and then in the directory itself there's a thing called property modifier. So on import you can say split it on the comma and make a list out of it once again. So just to mention it. So this was just the very first example. It would look like this, automation. I create a new import source, and I give it a name. I choose the type, well, it's SQL, and then it asks me for the query. I can choose the database resource name. So in Icinga Web, you can configure a lot of databases, and choose the database, store it, more or less, that's it. I have an example here. This is, well, a very stupid one. It's an SQL query, gives me some data. You can preview, and that's it. So this is just import. We didn't create any object yet, just imported the data. Okay, but given that we know SQL, migrating from Icinga 1 is pretty cool, and this is cool if you're running it for some time in parallel. Once you're preparing your Icinga 2 system, till you switch off the old one, and there's not much use of importing from the IDO apart from this. But of course, there are other components like CMDBs. Who is still using a CMDB? Who has an ongoing CMDB migration project? Everybody who has a CMDB is still migrating there, or migrating from the old one to the new one, or they have one but the data is wrong, and so on. So that brings me to my second scenario, data cleanup. Because as we all know, the import is fine, I can import data, but the data is pretty shitty. And this is where Director is a very powerful tool. Let's start with a simple example, locations. You know, people have a field location, nice, and one of them writes Nuremberg with UE, and the other one with the umlaut, the other one writes the English verb because he knows we are an international company, and so data is there. You can see something in your web form, but it's not usable. And our domain names written in many different ways, uppercase, lowercase, with or without a domain name. That's something you find not only in CMDBs, but everywhere. And first, of course, we say, no, we are strict. We just import the correct value, so we validate them, and that's it. So in theory, it works, but in practice, it doesn't. Because we talk to the people again and again, and you know, some of them just do not want to do it different because they wrote Nuremberg the same way like since 10 years, and they don't care if the other ones write it differently. So it's your problem, not his, in their beliefs. There are some people who are really willing to work, but usually that are those or that ones that are not equipped with enough permissions, because you know that he's willing to work, so do not grant him access. So Director helps you with a mechanism that's called a map. So I create first a data list, and that's called fixed messy location names, and I keep all the variants. You get an error after each run, so slowly you have a full list, and you can say, well, add a so-called property modifier to the import. Then I say, well, pick the location property, choose the map modifier. There are a lot of them. So if you, let's maybe go here, I can say modifiers, and you can add one. And there is a long list with property modifiers. The cool thing is also this part is a hook. So if you need to modify data in some special way, like running traceroute to find out who your gateway is, that's a real word example. So that's some people need to do this. Then you can have your own module, have a very small transform function there, and you will be here in the drop-down. I can choose your property modifier, and it then modifies the data in some way. I chose the map modifier, and I picked up that list with the messy location names, and I can say, what should I do when entries are missing? Then I can say, well, let the whole import run fail, or set it to null, or keep the original value. So there are some, every modifier has the possibility to ask you more questions, or to have more settings for that single modifier. That's nice, but we do not want to take care about that map. So that's a perfect job for our new apprentice. That's Kevin. It's in the company since like 2 weeks. We do not want to give him access to the whole director, because that's a lot. And the director gives you the possibility to restrict your users in various ways, but there is no way allowing you to say he can configure only that single list. So that's not a problem. He should just fill a comma separated value file, or since recently there's also Excel file support, and we use it as an import source. So he can just key value, put that list on the file share, everything is fine. Just sometimes he's not so correct with his data, he forgets something, and the import would complain. Nothing bad happens, it just stops importing from that source. Here he's missing a value in the first row, so you see the errors are pretty precise and it's correct that way. Let me show you this imports. It looks like that. So if you say preview, you see the data, and you can see here there's a null, and there's just the value missing in that comma separated value file. So that's not correct, because that's our key value. So it's not, he has to fix it. So our conclusion is if something goes wrong, we have to tell the apprentice, and director has a nice health check command, so you can use this as a check command in Icinga and check the various components of your Icinga. Maybe let's show it live. So you say Icinga CLI director health check, then it checks your parts of the configuration. You can create, for example, single checks. For example, you can say, I want to just check the deployment. So I say check deployment. And it then just checks this part. That's a check plugin. So you can use it in Icinga. I can show it you. There should be a check right here. Oh, it's red. That's correct. You see, director health check. We have a problem here, and you can see there's just the one for the apprentice, or it's German. Also, this one is red, of course. Just a funny example. Let me show you this live. You can add watch. So it's now refreshing live. And now I can say, let's make a broken deployment just for fun. So we have enough time, I think. Here you go. Take a broken one, this one, and deploy it again. And you see the last deployment failed. And check is red. And OK, then let's redeploy the correct one again. If I'm fast enough, I should see that the deployment is going on. No, it's too slow. If it's a slow deployment, you would see that the deployment is currently going on. And yeah, that's fine. Just that's the health check. And what we are doing, of course, is we create the check itself, and we send the notifications directly to the apprentice, because he's the one that should take care. Perfect. Just. He's super intelligent. So he's intelligent when it goes to find excuses. And we do not want our imports to be blocked for a day or so. Let's imagine that this is not just a map, but a very important source, so everything in theory would be blocked. And yeah, that's a problem, you know, code of conduct and so on. In these times, you can no longer use physical violence. It would help, I guess, but so what you do, you escalate it, of course. Escalations in Icinga 2 are a little bit different than in Icinga 1. You just create another notification with a delay in time. So you say, start the first notification after an hour, and then resend it every 2 hours. And, well, that's it. That's the solution to that. OK. Kevin. One other very short example. So we are often asked whether Icinga has some kind of auto discovery and so on, and like, you know, other tools are able to Nmap and then use the data and so. And I've always said, well, that's cool, but I do not want to monitor every single device I find without even knowing what it is doing. So maybe the information is interesting, but I do not want to monitor based off this. But if we would, we could. And that's why on GitHub you can find in my account a Nmap module, very small one, showing you just as an import source can be in your own module. Have a look at it, write your own code, because I do not consider Nmap being a very useful import source, but it works. So you choose import source, the Nmap module, give it a subnet, say, okay, in your hosts it cannot find in the DNS, because probably they are not useful at all. It gives you a preview, that's it. Just as a very simple example of what you can do in your own custom module. This is upgrade safe, so the Director keeps on releasing new versions. You do not have to modify a single line of code. When you disable your module, this will stop working, and that's it. Yeah. Then, next, real scenario. Our problem is that we had success with our monitoring, with Director and Icinga 2 are great. The problem is, as you probably know, the word success comes from sucks, because if you have success, people want more and more from you. And they then ask you to monitor our Windows servers. And you know, people like, I worked on Windows like 15 years ago the last time, on my desktop, on servers more often. And, yeah. But OK, let's accept the challenge. Unfortunately, they are not in our main CMDB, because they have their own CMDB, and of course it's currently being migrated to a new one, and so no data. But that's not a problem, because all the Windows servers are in the Active Directory, and that's very nice. Active Directory is a great data source. It's missing some data. Oh, this is German, sorry. But just it's a preview of some Active Directory, and here you can see, for example, their IP addresses. And who knows Active Directory knows that there is no IP address in Active Directory. So what are we doing? We are using property modifiers. And there are a lot of them, and some of them have really been built for Microsoft tasks. And you can see, for example, I pick the address, the property DNS host name, write it to address. Let me show this, just to give you a better understanding of how it works. If I have my property modifier, let's just add one here, close this one, so we can zoom in. You can say, I pick the host column, and I want to have the, let me see, get host by name, the DNS lookup, and then if it doesn't find it in DNS, it should, well, let the whole import run fail, but I want to know, because this doesn't exist in our environment. And the problem is this would now replace the host property. So in the column where I had my host name, there would be the IP address. That's nice, but where's my host? So property modifiers also allow you to give him a target property, and it would then write it, for example, to the address fields, and you have that property in a new one, just to give you an understanding of how it works. And there are some very nice ones, like if this is a workstation or disabled, as you have seen on the slides. There are nice booleans telling me if it is Active Directory controller or no. And this is very useful in Icinga 2, because you define a custom variable, sync that property to the custom variable, then all your Active Directory servers maybe also get some other templates added at import time, and all that Active Directory controllers get their own dedicated checks, like checking the health of your Active Directory forest and so on. And you know, having NS client running some PowerShell scripts through it, and yeah. Well, one example how to get them. For example, there's a property user account control. Very helpful on not only hosts but also on users and so. And this is a binary flag where they coded a lot of flags, like whether the account has been disabled. So, and it's not just checking the number. It's I don't know, 128 doesn't mean account disabled, but the bit 100 at that position means that it's disabled. For example, if you combine it with other flags, then just checking the number doesn't work. You have to do a bit mask, and that's what the bit mask match operator does. And you just tell it which position to look at and give it a description, and that's it. So very important, write meaningful descriptions so that people understand what's going on, or yourself, because after a year you do not remember what was 4096, I don't know. So this is useful, write descriptions, and then you get nice list where you really see what's going on, and yeah. Okay, more or less that's it. There's in the documentation of Director a very good example showing the basics of how to synchronize with Active Directory. So let's not go deeper into this example. Our next challenge, everything is going to be to run on some virtualization system, you know, and we right now on Metal are running only VMware ESXi, ESXi, so vSphere and so on. And there's a module on GitHub in the Icinga project that's a perfect import source for the Director. We can name them, sponsored by Volkswagen. Thank you. They're right now, they changed their minds towards open source, and they right now love it to be also mentioned. So thank you. This module is just an import source. So you configure it. It looks like this. You configure the access to your vCenter. You give it the credentials. You can also go to a proxy. You can use a SOX proxy or a normal one. And yeah, that's it. And then it gives you the possibility to import either virtual machines like here or host systems. And more or less, that's it. So it was just a very short 4 days project. And that was the result. Works fine. But what does it do? You get information about your hosts, and now you're applying, using apply rules, a lot of check, VMware ES6 health checks and so on, and they're hammering your vCenter if you have a lot of them. They're pretty expensive because for example, the Perl SDK from VMware consumes a lot of RAM, a lot of checks running in parallel, use even more RAM, so this is pretty expensive and not so sexy, so all this must become more fancy. And the good news is I'm currently, or since a few months, working for a customer on a new module where we are doing a lot more with VMware. So this has its own database. It's synchronizing one or more vSphere vCenters, even completely distinct ones, and collecting all the information. So you give it the same credentials like in the other module, it connects, it gets like all the hosts here, and I can show it live. You have, for example, here my host systems. Let's close this one. And then you sort it by CPU, by memory, and so on. Nothing special here. What's pretty cool is you can add, like, give me the BIOS version and maybe the service stack, so it also links to your vendor. And as we have the BIOS version, let's have a look whether we are vulnerable to Spectre or no. So it links you to and so on. So this is how it works. And I don't know. Let's take this one. It will get even more prettier. So there are some still. Like this is a little bit rough. It will look better once it's finished, but yeah, that's it. And for example, here there are 82 VMs, so it switches to the virtual machine tab, and you can of course sort also them and add more columns here and say, I don't know, network I/O, and okay, give me the one doing most stress and so on. So if there are guest utilities, it fetches all the disk partitions inside the host, but it also knows your data store. So if you click on the data store, you see the resolution is a little bit bad here. You see all the VMs on the data store sorted by size in that example, and you want to see which machine is this. You can click it and so on. You see how much of its own data is it using, how much on the data store, and. Oh, and as we are on the data store, let's see which vMotions went on. So we can see, okay, on Friday there have been a lot of vMotions. This one has been moved from here to another data store, and these were just migrations from one host to the other one and kept on the same data store, and so on. So this, just to give you an idea of where we are heading to, so this is one module. And of course, this will also be an import source to the director, but what's much cooler is we have all that knowledge in a dedicated database very fast. As you can see, this is real data, and I have like 3,000 VMs and can like click like this. Whoever used the front end of VMware, I'll stop here. Okay. Oh, you also see the hardware in there. So we're using this information to then for some performance metrics we are collecting. So to give an understanding that the disk I/O, which disk does it affect, and which network interface is it, and so on. So it's not every VM is just one disk, one network interface, but a lot of them. And yeah, that's it. It's currently in the work. You cannot use it right now. I've hidden or the Git master is missing this tab here, so you cannot configure your connection, and this was just to not allow you to use it, because I do not care about schema migrations and so on, because we are moving pretty fast these days, but as you can see, it's already pretty advanced, and it will be released when it's done, but I guess this is very soon. Okay, as you can see, this is amazing, but this is, you know, still hardware and so 90s, so this is not what people are using right now. We want to move to the cloud. You know, everybody's cloudy, so and everybody's of course doing AWS, so Amazon, and we also must go there. And since quite some time we have a little module. It's very simple. You can find it on GitHub. You define an import source, you give it your access key, and you choose the region you want to work with, and then you choose the object type you want to import. Now, please, depending on how you're using AWS, do not import every single instance. It usually makes no sense. You want to monitor your applications. So what's I love to use are, for example, the auto-scaling groups. That's one application, and you just want to get the configured flags. So in the synchronization rule, I say, well, I want to see the desired size, the minimum size, the maximum size, and have check commands. There are a lot of them on GitHub. Nothing special I can suggest to use, but just Google around, and then use these properties on your hosts, being auto-scaling groups, to define your monitoring. And then that's easy. Then you can decide whether you are still using their own monitoring service and ask or proxy that or whatever. That's up to you. That's right now not part of the module. Of course, if you want to make this as fancy as the VMware one, just let us know as soon as we have time. We live from, you know, I work for NetWays, and we live from customers that want us to do some special modules, usually open source. So if you have some idea and want to have it realized, let us know. Well, that's it. Let's keep it short. Now we realized, oh, they got all our data, and we didn't expect it. And now we feel not so good about that, and it doesn't matter because we heard that right now everybody does containers, so let's move there, and you always have to be with the hippest people. And just some very short examples because I'm running out of time. There is a module we are using. We have our NetWays clouds and have our NetWays web services. And for example, we are using for part of it Mesos Marathon, and a colleague of mine, Achim, wrote this little module being an import source for Director. We've seen Proxmox. Where is he? It's fantastic. Maybe I would love to do something with Kubernetes. Right now I have a customer that starts using it. Maybe they have some time, but we'll see. Or you can talk to Blairim. He already worked a little bit with Kubernetes. The idea is always the same. This is a screenshot from a little older screenshot from what my colleagues are doing. We have services, so you can have services in the NetWays cloud, but I guess Sebastian will tell you about it. And what we're doing is those containers, those applications we deploy get some environment parameters, and we deploy also those required for the monitoring. So for every, for example, let's say GitLab instance, we define a couple of service checks we define, and we just import from marathon the information about all the applications we deploy with the credentials we need to monitor them. And so it's pretty easy. So people are always scared about monitoring all the containers and so, but sync applications, and then it's not a problem. And so that's how we're doing it. Every instance that's going deployed for a customer gets its own monitoring. The module is written by someone, well, it's a DevOps guy, so he does not really write code. It was, I guess, his very first PHP project, but just creating that import source is copy and paste and adjust it to your code, and it's easy. So, yeah, 5 minutes left. This brings me to the last example, my favorite one. Containers right now are an old thing, and you have to a little bit think beyond the cloud. And life, I work as a consultant mostly, and life out there in the real world is pretty rough, and there are some older but really time-tested and battle-tested configuration management systems and data exchange systems and so on. And there's a related OC model, and this explains how this is going to work. And if you are going to study it, you will see that this is really, the configuration in an Excel file with a handshake handed over on a USB stick. So this is what you very often find in the real world, and it looks like this. And I'm sorry, it's German. It's from an old presentation, but this is my favorite example. And it's not a fake. It really works. So please let me show. We have. Oh, wrong tab. What? Here you go. That's it. Wrong screen once again. Come on. Yeah, it's real. It's an Excel file. There's one special effect. You can see here the IP address. Let's zoom in. It's one time on the right side, one time on the left side. Usually you still see the dots, but once you save and reopen it, at least in LibreOffice, the dots go away. But just having the number on the left or on the right side happens because some IP addresses have 3 numbers in every place, and then it thinks it's billions, and so it makes a number out of it. And even if you export it to a comma-separated value file, data is wrong, but even in Excel itself, if I parse the file, the value itself is not written. So in every basic Excel course, lesson, whatever, the first thing you learn is how to format data. But most people don't know, so you have to deal with data like this. And as you can see here, that's a string, and this is just a number, and I have no idea what it means. But of course, there's a solution for this in the director, so let's create this as a last real example. Create a new input source. Let's do it step by step together. And that's yeah, perfect. Auto completion is great. Let's choose source type. There's a module called File Shipper. It knows a lot of things, and it also is able to import from Excel files, also YAML files, JSON, and so on. But right now, pick Excel files. Base directories have to be configured first, just for security reasons. So you are not allowed to choose any directory here. And I choose my data exchange directory, and the file is the one you have seen before. I can choose my worksheet by position or by name. Of course, I choose it by name, and they have beautiful names here. Now it's hosts. And well, that's it. Oh, a key column name. This used to be the host name. Do I have it here? Yeah. Okay. Nice. Let's show you the preview. And you can see data, but a little bit messed up. So let's add some property modifier. And there is a special one to fix IP formatted as number in Excel, and I pick the IP address, and that's fine. And so it looks much better now. Now we have the problem, production prod, everything is wrong here. We could do the same game with our map modifier and say, okay, all the variants I have here, I'm going to fix them, but I'm bored, so I'm not willing to care about. So, that's no, that's a Zustand, and I'm just going to use a regular expression where it is that everything that starts with, oh, I'm sorry. Perfect. Broad case insensitive is going to be production. And there you go. And so on. So, you know, that's the real world out there, and sometimes you have to do not so beautiful solutions, but by the end of the day, they work, and you get your work done. And back to my slides, I guess. No. That's it. Thank you. I'm slightly over time. Any questions?
Robert wins the prize for the most questions asking during the whole day. Yes, absolutely perfect.
So we are here for questions. So my question is, the director is nice and fancy and colorful, but it only imports configuration like my IP address. But I have to install the Icinga client myself on the host.
No. Question was, you know, the Icinga clients, of course you have to install it on by yourself. Of course, director does not have access to your systems and cannot install the agent, but it has very fancy features exactly for this. There is the self-service. You can configure the self-service API in directory itself. It's here hidden infrastructure. Then there are the is the self-service API, and you can configure. This is right now for Windows systems that you want to provide an installation source for the Icinga package from the official packages Icinga.com from somewhere in your network. But even if you use the official ones, if you want to have it safe, you can provide SSH1 hashes of the binaries. So before installing it, it's going to check if the binaries are correct. You choose the agent version. You can say, I want to have 2.8.1 on every system. And you can also tell him to allow updates or no. So depending on what you configure here, it is also going to up and downgrades. So you can say, I give them the new version, and on the next run of the, we'll see it right now, the installer script, it will pick the version configured here. And you can configure the NS client together with Icinga 2. And but more or less that's it. So given this, next thing you need is a host template where you say, I have a Windows agent, and here it gives you the possibility to generate a self-service API key. So if I drop it, this is no longer usable. When I have a host template and generate such a key, then this key here gives you the possibility to, through its self-service API without authentication, just with this key, create new hosts being using that template, nothing else. So the full game is, there's also the documentation here. There is a PowerShell script, a very extensive one, a PowerShell module. You can use the remote PowerShell command invocation. So you say invoke some command on a server, on a list of servers, and run from a central point that PowerShell script with that key on all your nodes, and all of them are going to pick the agent from that source, configure it correctly, register themselves. Even if you imported the Windows host from Active Directory, order doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who was first. If it first discovered it in Active Directory or first installed it by the agent, by the end of the day, both variants work, and it's going to install it, register himself. If Active Directory was faster, it's going to claim that host, and by registering a host, that node gets a key only for himself. So no host can access information for another host. It's just a first comes, first serve. So if you claim to be a specific host name, then it's you, and you can configure yourself. And then that's it, more or less. I'm sorry. Did this answer your question?
Yes, for the Windows world, yes.
Thank you.
Such a good liar. Can you repeat it? More questions?
I actually have a question. Let's say I already have a configuration in the files and I want to start using Director. From what I understand, it expects some predefined configuration. It won't pick up what I already have. So if I want to use both files and let's say Director for the VMware, how should I do this properly?
Okay. There's a getting started documentation Director, and the first thing it explains, if you are going to start with Director, please start from scratch. So there's no way to migrate manually written configuration to the Director because it's not a configuration format, it's a DSL, a domain-specific language. You cannot really parse it, or not fully. And so what you can, for example, do is if you want to migrate, you can there's an import source importing from the Icinga core. So you can import your host objects, or use the IDO is also there with Icinga too, so you can import them from them and recreate your services in the Director, for example, because it exports no template, it exports no apply rules, so that's hard to get. Or you can run in parallel. If you, for example, say, I want to have Director just for the VMware part and not for the rest, then you can keep your manual configuration. Director deploys to a completely separate so-called package in Icinga too. So as long as you are not using conflicting names, that's not a problem. It works perfectly. Just maybe be careful with your apply rules to not have, or maybe you can also have apply rules in a local config affecting objects deployed by the Director. That's perfectly legal. You just have to know what you're doing. But if you're writing the configuration by your hand, you know how it works.
Any more questions? Even a little bit over time, but that's okay, I think.
It's your coffee break, so.
No problem.
Why in the documentation you suggest to install Icinga Director on a standalone host and not on the master?
No. No, I wrote most of it.
On the tiny chart, bottom on the first documentation page.
No.
Okay.
I'm sometimes running web and Director on separate systems, but I do not remember having documented anything similar. You can perfectly run Director on the node with your master, that's fine.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. It only talks through the API, so it is perfectly legal to have it on another system, but that's not a requirement. Absolutely not.
Thank you.
Is there a possibility to revert only one single change?
Sure.
Before deployment?
As you have seen, I changed my IP address before, if I'm not wrong. No, here. This one. As you can see, this was my change. I changed the IP address. And you can see the old one and the new one. And I changed the system owner. Well, let's restore the former object. And this restore means not rolling back in time, but this right now is a new change, picking the former state of the whole object and applying it to the current one. So if you go to forward in history, now you can see the same change the other way around. More questions in the coffee break, I guess. Oh, no. Oh,
Okay.
one more. Come on.
Last question for now. Means for now here.
For now here.
Questions afterwards.
Okay, I hope it's a short one. I don't know if you mentioned it, but how does the VMware module get all its data without hammering the API?
Okay, so
the VMware API.
yeah. First, the VMware module, the new one, is built on some of the Director libraries, but we're going to separate them at some time in the future. So you do not even need Director for that module. You can even run it separately. And to answer the question, it's using the SOAP API. So time ago, I found a very good tool for working with XML. It's on every Linux system called bin.rm. But yeah, you know, that's their API and you have to work with it. It's scary. It's a very scary API and all the SDKs are a mess. So we wrote it from scratch. Or in that example I did. So we're talking SOAP and yeah, full stop.
Okay. Again, thank you very much, Thomas, for that great presentation.
Thank you.
you.